Welcome to the gathering spot. This is the Cardinal picnic area in Seneca Creek State Park, and I'm sure he'll show some other footage. And of course, anybody that came to the gatherings in the early '00s knows the spot, knows that the linguiça cooking pit is right behind me over there. But that's a revamping of slalom. You know, that was a revival of slalom. That's definitely not where it started. Not here. I don't even know that here was here when slalom started in Maryland. I come to skateboarding from Alpine skiing, which means I have vast differences in my opinion of what should be going on in slalom racing compared to a lot of other people in slalom racing. I come from Alpine, so for example, the notion of racing on flat doesn't make any sense to me when you don't have to. Ultimately, I first became aware of slalom skateboarding either in the summer of 1966 or 67, because my father was given a board by his ski buddies on his birthday in 1966 because he just had his fourth kid and they were like, you're never skiing again. So here's a skateboard. Well, we might go to the beach once a week in a year, you know, to Ocean City, but we weren't beach culture people. I may have had some pop cultural gadget awareness of surfing. But for us, the instant the skateboard came into our house, it was the summer alternative to skiing in the winter. So the first thing you do is set up courses. You know, there wasn't any other influence. There was no other influence. There was, you know, hand down surfy stuff. No, it would not have even occurred to us. I love courses. I'm known as a course setter in slalom, or at least in the older guys in slalom know me as a great course setter. I love courses. I love chalking wheels when you have a slalom course set up, and chalk the circle around the cone and then pull the cones off and really look at what course is being taken, where the turns don't happen at the cones, turns happen between the cones. You know, and it's the same thing with ski courses. We used to love to go up in Canada to go to the coin-operated slalom course where you could drop a coin, start, hit a wand, and get your time at the bottom. But I used to love to do that. And then moreover, at the end of the day, after sitting in the lodge for a half hour and the lifts are closed, drinking beer, to walk back up the hill and actually look at where the turns, once the gates are pulled out, and to actually look at what the course is. Because that all gates do is manipulate a path. You know, so it's a different way of looking at it. It's a skiway, it's a hill, it's a gravity sport way of looking at it. So again, very, very early for me. The first time I rode, it was at a home where they were slalom riding on that board on a sidewalk with sidewalk cracks around Dixie cups, upright with little rocks in them to keep them from being blown over when they'd go around them. And I didn't have the weight to power clay wheels over sidewalk cracks. I mean, I have chin scar from riding that board on my belly on that sidewalk and hitting sidewalk and coming off on my chin. When we moved from that neighborhood to a neighborhood with no sidewalks and hills, so for me, spring of 1970, most of my family had fallen out. But having moved the previous fall, spring of 1970 was going to be my first chance to run gates. on a skateboard. And so I even dragged my family out and into it a little bit at first, but it became my thing pretty much. And I did it clay wheels. I clay wheel skated with the kid across the street. He and his family had two little, like Toys R Us toy skateboards. One was red, one was blue. You know, and we realized it was the first time skating with that guy was the first time I was ever lifting the front wheels off the ground. Because in the rain, in a 2-car garage with only one car in it, you have to tick around the corners. Yeah. I wouldn't say I tick-tacked, but we were definitely ticking around the corners to get around the corners. So that's the first thing I did anything with the intention being foot on the tail, maneuvering, surfy, anything. And then he fell away, and then Christmas 70, seems like Christmas 75 would be too late, but then it seems like Christmas 74 would be too early when I got my first freeformer board with clay wheels. I think it must have been Christmas 75, 8th grade, but I thought by the time I was in 8th grade, I was already a whole hog into it because, you know. So anyway, and of course then it was the 70s, and slalom was a completely viable format in competitive skateboarding. And the first competition, to get right to stuff, the first competition in this area, in you know, we were kids, we didn't have driver's licenses, and our parents weren't big on, most of us, on big travels about skateboarding. But the first organized competition that I knew of in Montgomery County, Maryland, was early June of 1977 at Olney Manor Park in Olney, right where the skate park is now. Back then, there was no swimming pool. That whole pool building was not there. The skate park was certainly not there. So that was kind of just a big open space. The back hill, which is where the slalom race was, the one that goes up onto Avery Church Road, or Emory Church Road, is now horribly rough with big speed bumps and completely like gloomy in shade. And if you look at the pictures that were taken at that race, at least the one picture I have, there are no trees. So talk about feeling old. But there was a slalom race on that back hill. I took third in my age group. There are people who I now know who may have been at that event that I didn't know then and don't relate to them being at that event. I mean, some of the Toke team guys, Heyman, those guys could have been at Olney Manor, and I wouldn't necessarily remember. Steve Nelson, who was a big name in skateboarding in the area back then, was there. He's passed away now. The guy I'd like to know, there was a guy that showed up. So again, we're all like insular. Your area, your friends. Then there was another area with another group, and you know, we didn't travel a lot, so we didn't know a lot of people. And they held this event, and this guy showed up, and I was going to ride my bunger, which is just like this gross sheet of pressed fiberglass that has no form to it and just goes blah, 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 like spaghetti. But this guy showed up, and he was wearing Gordon and Smith ketchup and mustard colors, the whole outfit, the helmet, the pants, the shoes match, had a nice cambered Gordon and Smith slalom board, no cutaway, just the straight slalom board. And we had no idea who that guy was. I, to this day, have no idea who that guy was. He was tall, curly brown hair. I have no idea, and I never saw him again. But he let me ride his board. So he won, and then my closest skate buddy was a guy named Robbie Hilty, who's now dead. And it was interesting. Robbie's like a total natural skater, and I'm not. I mean, Robbie Hilty was one of, kind of Jay Adams' naturalness. He was it was in his blood. Never really was for me. It's something I like to do, but it didn't necessarily come to me naturally. And so that was going to be the big thing. If Mr. Technical Slalom Guy, which is kind of what I was, could beat Robbie on his blue Rockered Z-Flex, Jay Adams we got a lead sled. He beat me on his Z-Flex. I was riding that guy's cambered slalom board. So that was the first one. 2 weeks later, Cabin John Park down in Bethesda, Maryland, had one. And because it's Bethesda, I know I have heard a lot more about like the Toke Team guys and those guys having been at that. But again, you're not going to meet everybody, know anybody when you're 3-4 groups come together quickly and then disperse again. So there was that. And I'm kind of thinking like that might have been, 77. That's Freestyle Skateboard Park summer. So I went away to summer performing arts camp and came back, and there was a competition at Freestyle Skateboard Park in Gaithersburg, which did not have slalom, did not have any room for slalom, but being a tech nerd, I was also a high jumper. And so I actually, when I got special permission from the State Board of Education to skateboard at their summer camp because I was practicing for an event that I was going to do when I got back and all that kind of stuff. So I was practicing high jumping the whole time I was at summer camp, and came back and won that for my age group, beating Wilson Fair, which was interesting because Wilson Fair was, among other things, an actual high jumper. For that, I would think we were still under 4 feet at that point, high 3 feet, maybe. I was practicing in my basement. I got to the point where I couldn't practice in the basement anymore because I was punching the floor joists overhead. I eventually cleared 4.9 and eventually in my life, and eventually made like 4.6, 4.7. So I wasn't as much as a foot off the world record at the point, but I'm short, big powerful leg thing at the time. So anyway, so those were the competitions for 77. And then it seems to me that the next slalom competition that I was aware of would have been the Bel Air, the Bowie competition on Racetrack Road beside the shopping center in Bowie, Maryland, that I believe was a Bel Air sponsored thing. And there was definitely slalom there. There was high jumping there, there was downhill speed there, and there was freestyle there. And then part of it was I was never tricky. I was never a freestyler. I mean, I come from skiing. So it's about going down hills and negotiating that fast. So I don't really even know if the Toke Teamers were freestyling. I wouldn't have even known it. But that was an interesting one, and that is the first competition that I can remember. I mean, Wilson Fair's still around, and looking at he's on Facebook, and he's looking at coming out and skating with old guys every once in a while. He's the guy who had a 2-page spread in Skateboarder magazine out of Gaithersburg. Bob Selthofer, who we skated with, who was a brilliant freestyler, and eventually ended up working in the pro shop at Freestyle, running the pro shop at Glass Wave, and then buying Glass Wave and moving it to Ocean City, and then becoming Salty of Endless Summer, was certainly there. And that's somebody that now is still alive and around, not necessarily skating anymore. The one who is around, and I don't know how much skating he's doing now, but I can't even, I don't know how much skating I'm doing now. The one who is still around from the buoy competition that was in the early OO's revival, skating here, was definitely with us, is Eric Wahlgren. Do you know who Eric Wahlgren is? Eric is by nature an engineer, like a physical engineer. I mean, he's actually did a reality TV show about building shit out of nothing and all this kind of stuff. And he is, at his core, the truest racer. Nah, maybe that's not true. Maybe that's not true. Simon Levine might be the truest, because he wants to race whatever he's got. Whether it's a motorcycle, a car, a skateboard, or whatever, he's a racer. And Eric Wahlgren is definitely still around, and he definitely races cars at Summit Point and wins his, annual class championships and all, with his Area 51 car. He's all secretive about all his tech. He's badass. Oh, and he's a punk rocker. He's Linus. He's a punk rock drummer. I mean, I don't know a lot about punk rock, but he's known in the DC punk rock scene as Linus. He's a punk rock drummer too. Eric is. And then it happened. So that's the summer of '77. By summer of '78, Freestyle Skate Park is dead, because it doesn't have vert. We're moving on to Crofton Skate Park has opened with pools. Alexandria has opened with pools. Crofton opened with a slalom hill. It never really got used much because skateboarding was not. Slalom was put off as too organized, too sport-y, not anti-societal enough, not anti-social enough, competition, just the evil of competing against my fellow blood brother skateboarder. It's an art, damn it. So slalom went by the wayside, and skateboarding went by the wayside for me from probably '79 to '84. There were two in my life. One was in the late '80s, because I was GBJ, the skateboard photographer, Lapper Magazine, industry. I mean, people knew me. That made me conscious of the California Amateur Skateboard League, and subsequently the PSL, the Professional Skateboard League, which was something Castle created and attached, which meant professional slalom racing in the late '80s, which was totally off the skateboard radar at the time. That's when Corton was just unbeatable. And so there was that, and that was revival in and of myself, because I became aware. We didn't have the internet yet, but I became aware there are actually other people in the world who still want to race. And then I pay money to be Killer Bee Racing and get myself all set up, and I'm practicing on local tennis courts. Actually, Montgomery Village Junior High School used to have a tennis court with a bank at one end of it, and I'd start on the bank, and do 14 cones in 4.5 seconds, down the not hit the fence. Just by myself, solely by myself. I was living with Sam Boo at the time, and Sam would come out sometimes to ride with me, sometimes to take pictures of me for me, sometimes to shoot video as it moved along a little more. And Sam's a natural skateboarder, so he's always fun to slalom with. He can do anything on a skateboard. So that was going on, and it was right around the same time that in the magazines, in Transworld and Thrasher, that's right when GNS resurrected a boingy board, a flexi board, a Fiberflex board, and the whole ad campaign was "Learn to Turn." you know, and it'd be Jim Gray with the board all flexed and him doing a turn, kind of a thing. Late 80s, I don't think 89, something like that. Learn to Turn was the campaign. So there was just a little energy there. But, you know, I got to go to one race professionally. I went to Reno, you know, and again, okay, so here you go. I'm an alpinist. I've packed up. My first turner got stolen from me, and since then, I'm back on a Quicksilver and other stuff while Bob Turner's making my personal turner that wasn't delivered to me until I was at Reno, and there was no way I was going to adapt to a new turner. Well, Bob Turner's Bob Turner. I mean, Turner Summer Ski particularly in the 70s, in the heyday of that first wave of skateboarder magazine and slalom racing, as you know, urethane wheel slalom racing. Bob Turner's boards were the Ferraris. I mean, not only were they extraordinary racing machines, but they were beautiful. They were art objects. And I had been, in the mid 80s, at the beginning of that revival for me, I had been sold or given a board, I don't remember, but thank you anyway. Steve Byers, still out there, Gulf Coast Skates, is what he was back then. But I had a car stolen from me up in Philadelphia, and when I got it back, my Turner wasn't in it. And those people I'm sure don't even know what they got. I would have rather had the Turner back than the car. So I had Bob Turner make me one that, as I said, wasn't delivered until that race. But I've flown to Reno, right? Reno, Sierra, which means mountains, Nevada, Sierra Nevada, Reno, and their race is going to be a flat wiggle on polished concrete indoors. What a total waste of my time. I mean, because they come from surfing, the powers, or at best, even if they're slalom people, from water skiing, where you have to go in a straight line because you're towing behind a boat. And then, so I went to that race, and there was also a street style contest indoors. And so they were making all the little ramps and everything, so there's sawdust all over the place, polished concrete floor. Couldn't practice, couldn't ride, couldn't get my equipment set up, sitting in the grandstands. Watch somebody push a wide dry mop, but with some wet spray on it, down the center and clear a spot. I was like, oh, cool, I can see what my wheels do on this surface. And I ran out and I threw down my Quicksilver, which has original gull-wing trucks on it. And I don't have a kingpin bracket on the front. I'm trying to remember, was it the first time I learned why they had kingpin brackets? It might be the second time, but I just may not have had one. But what that means is after you bend it back and forth enough, the kingpin's going to snap off at the saddle, at the cradle where it's sitting in the truck. It snaps off right there, because otherwise it's a piece of steel sticking out that you just do this to until it lets go. That's why they have that retrofit of that bracket that comes up and holds the nipple on the end of the kingpin. I didn't have one of those. So I threw down that board, and I was going to have an equipment test right there in this moment. That's why I was pushing it. And I snapped that kingpin, front kingpin, board digs in, I arc through the air. Since the 70s, my inclination is to put my head behind my left arm, tuck and roll, take it there. So I completely, the scar is from a different time I used this arm that way. But I totally blew up this arm, turned into a swellbow about back of my hand to about here. I had about a day and a half until the race, and so I spent a whole day and a half. I'll never forget, I'm in Reno watching the British Open on television. It's July, and for 2 days or day and a half, I have my arm in an ice chest. sitting there on the bed watching television with my arm totally cased in a chest of ice. And then I got up the day of the race and wrapped it, put on an elbow pad, wrapped that, put on a knee pad over that, and then used a thigh wrap to wrap the whole thing to my body, and went to the race and raced one-armed. Wow. And took 5th in my one professional race. But that's when I realized, the surf-oriented skaters and the water skiing slalom people don't know what they're missing by not taking advantage of the alpinism in slalom. I mean, slalom, even before water skiing, comes from ski racing on mountains. It means the winding path is what slalom means in one of the Scandinavian languages. And ultimately, so, as long as we're doing an interview, I'll put it right out there. I don't like head-to-head dual racing. I think it's pointless. I mean, it's visually can be exciting, but ultimately then the people that think that they should race on mirrored courses actually makes it less visually exciting, takes the visual excitement out, because synchronicity allows you to see where the racers are in relationship to each other. Mirroring really doesn't, just in watching a race. But just like in real ski racing, real ski racing is FIS, where nobody slalom races against another guy on another slalom course. They race on a slalom course, and they get a time, and the next guy goes down and he gets a time. Or a giant slalom course, or a super giant slalom course, or a downhill course. And that's all skateboard racing needs to be. The Alpine side. Head-to-head is a false racing format that is done for visual reasons. The reason it's false is there is no way you can make two courses exactly the same, so the real race isn't the head-to-head, it's the cumulative total of the racers run on each put together. Why not go to a bigger park and just make that one long course?
Makes it more accurate.
Well, it's just it's what are you interested in? More challenge or the visual excitement for the fans? That's California. That's California. I'm doing this for the people watching. I'm not doing it for the people watching. I'm doing it because I have a sense of competition that is fed in me by alpine skiing. And we have all the equipment we need to just, maybe I just went through a job change. Maybe it's time for me to go back to trying to create a U.S. national organization, which I tried once, the United States Slalom Skateboarding Federation. But if I do it, it's going to be the way I like slalom to be. And maybe that will be completely unsuccessful. But it's going to be, when you come to a race, you're not racing head to head. You're just not. There's no point. You can make more course if you're not worried about being able to mirror it or echo it on the hill and leave space for the other one. I will admit, because it was that, I've actually had a dual racing moment for me that was like, woo, that was cool. Because that was the first world championship I went to out in Morro Bay. It was dual courses. I didn't set the course. Jack set the course for the first one. I set the course for the second year. But I was standing, they had a starting ramp. I hate starting ramps. I think making your board and yourself accelerate is part of the discipline. If you're going into the course with that much speed, you're taking out something that I want you to be talented at. I set courses where if you go through these 3 cones at full speed, you're not going to be able to make that next cone. because deceleration is as much a part of racing. I'm a F1 guy, not a drag racer. Deceleration is as much a part of racing as acceleration is. And so when I set up races, we're going to start out of a taped box on the ground that you have to stay in until go. And you can create whatever contrivance, like the old Henry Hester crow hop, you want inside that box. Because I created something that was like, when I read about Henry Hester's crow hop start, my mind said that must be this. And so now I can get myself to a point where everything in my body is across the starting line except below here, with my board still behind the line. Just with the foot back, I'm Mongo. 1, 2, 3, and on the pull back from 3, you hop your ground foot forward to the line. Yeah, and so your whole body, racing technique. And so those are the kind of things I like. If you've got starting ramps, I particularly don't like recurve starting ramps, like rampy radius curves. I'd rather have a clunk, flat clunk, is what we had at that first Morro Bay. We had a straight plank, which I prefer. I don't like trying to ride transition with my feet in the position they need to be in for me to race. Clunk clunk I can handle. I was clunking on the tennis courts at Montgomery Village Junior High. But that one race, the one race where I had the cool head-to-head experience, is actually captured on video somewhere. The one of the videos from the early 2000s, maybe a Malika video, was I was in the starting gate, hand on the poles, guy beside me, I think he's from Scandinavia, I think he's a European. I'm standing there, and Dan Gessmer is the starter, and he's standing between the ramps, and it's course 1 ready, course 2, or red course ready, blue course ready, whatever it was. And we each said yes, and he said, on your marks, after you get your readies, on your marks, and then go, was what it would be. So red course ready, blue course ready, yes, yes. On your marks, and then Henry Hester, who's sitting in the goddamn booth down by the finish line, sorry, excuse my language, with a microphone in front of his face. Dan Gessmer goes, set, and Henry goes, and Andy did it. So right before go, somebody calls my name. Go. Other guy takes off. I'm standing there like somebody called my name. Wow. And then I took off. I beat that guy. I beat that guy. And I beat him bad. I mean, I beat him right at the finish line, but considering how far back I came from, I mean, I may probably beat him by 6 inches in front wheel crossing the line. But considering I came from probably 2.5 cones back, I ate him up, and they loved it because I was on my old Quicksilver, and that old Quicksilver makes a really cool, hard sound while it's racing. So I've had some dual fun. I mean, I will admit, I've had some dual fun, and that was a fun moment. But all in all, not enough fun for me to believe that should, unless it is a separate. You know, I mean, FIS doesn't do it at all, skiing. But there were the World Pro, whatever, the World Cup, the Pro, because FIS, because it's Olympics, was all amateur. And so whatever the Pro was, and that's where you got like the Subaru Series in these courses in California or in Colorado, where there's a lot of this going on. It could be done. I mean, it could still continue to be done, but it's not a priority for me. I think we're just missing out on making the most by limiting ourselves to straight lines, to flat pavements, to it's not limiting because you can do the other things as well. Nothing says you can't do both. but putting our focus on straight lines and flat surfaces and starting ramps instead of on natural, go to a hill, throw some obstacles on it, and see who can get through the obstacles fastest.